I need you to hear me, and I need you to hear me clearly. What we are facing this summer isn't some distant, far-off threat. It's right on our doorstep. The risk of massive grid failures due to heightened solar activity has never been more real, and ignoring it could leave you and your loved ones in the dark, literally and figuratively. Since Solar Cycle 25 began in 2019, scientists have been tracking its trajectory with growing concern. They initially predicted it would peak around July 2025, giving us what we thought was more time to prepare. But now, the data tells a far more terrifying story. Some experts believe we may have already hit that peak in late 2024. The sun is more active than anticipated, and the signs have been escalating. This isn't science fiction or some fringe conspiracy. Increased solar activity has a very real, very destructive potential to cripple our way of life. Solar flares, geomagnetic storms, and coronal mass ejections can wreak havoc on our most fundamental systems. Our communications infrastructure, our GPS satellites, even the power grids that fuel our homes, hospitals, and businesses, all are vulnerable. I don't think most people truly grasp how fragile this entire system is. One well-aimed burst of solar plasma can fry transformers, disrupt critical communications, and plunge entire regions into prolonged blackouts. What happened in Quebec in 1989 is often cited as a cautionary tale, but even that blackout, lasting only 9 hours, was relatively minor compared to what could happen today, when we are far more reliant on interconnected digital networks. If you're not paying attention to this, you could be one of the millions left scrambling for food, water, and safety in the middle of a system-wide collapse. The warning signs are flashing, and they're growing brighter every day. Understanding solar cycles and solar storms. I've spent months digging into the science behind this. If you're like me, you probably didn't think much about the sun's weather patterns before, but let me tell you, you should. The sun, just like Earth, goes through its own cycles of calm and chaos. These solar cycles last about 11 years, fluctuating between solar minimums, where things are relatively quiet, and solar maximums, where activity surges. Solar Cycle 25 is turning out to be far more violent than initially predicted, and we're staring down the barrel of its fury right now. The signs are unmistakable. Sunspots have multiplied. These dark blemishes on the sun's surface are indicators of magnetic instability, precursors to more violent solar phenomena. Solar flares, sudden bursts of radiation and light, are already erupting with greater frequency. But it's the coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, that you really need to lose sleep over. These are massive clouds of charged plasma and magnetic fields hurled directly into space. And when one is aimed at Earth, what scientists call a full halo CME, the results can be catastrophic. Solar flares move at the speed of light, hitting us in minutes, but CMEs travel more slowly, taking anywhere from 15 to 72 hours to arrive. That means we might have a day or two of warning, or maybe only hours. The terrifying part is that our modern infrastructure, from satellites orbiting thousands of miles above us to transformers buried deep within our cities, was never designed to withstand this kind of assault. CMEs can cause geomagnetic storms so intense that they induce currents in power lines, pipelines, and communication cables, melting metal, frying circuits, and rendering entire electrical systems useless. And while the sun has always done this, our world has never been as dependent on vulnerable interconnected tech as it is right now. A Carrington event-level storm like the one in 1859, if it struck today, could knock out power grids on a continental scale, disabling satellites, halting air travel, collapsing banking systems, and silencing communication networks for weeks or even months. The more I learned, the colder the pit in my stomach grew. We are sitting ducks. The impact of solar storms. Let me be blunt. The impact of these storms isn't theoretical. It is happening. It has happened, and it will happen again, soon. When a powerful solar storm strikes, the first thing we lose is communication. High-frequency radio signals, the backbone of aviation, maritime traffic, and emergency services can vanish without warning. Polar regions are hit hardest, but make no mistake, the effects ripple across the globe. Airplanes forced to reroute, ships adrift with crippled navigation, first responders left blind at the worst possible moments. Imagine being in an emergency with no way to call for help, no GPS to guide you, no clear information to tell you where danger is coming from. That's not paranoia, that's the documented result of a strong solar flare impact. And let's talk about GPS. You think your smartphone, your car's navigation system, your farm's precision-guided equipment are safe? Think again. Solar radiation can corrupt satellite signals, leading to navigational errors that range from frustrating to deadly. Commercial flights could be thrown off course, maritime vessels could veer dangerously off their routes, even the high-tech farming systems that many rely on for food production can be thrown into chaos. Our dependence on satellite-guided accuracy is so ingrained that losing it for even a day could ripple across global supply chains in ways that are hard to fathom. But the most frightening threat of all, the one that haunts my thoughts at night, is the risk to the power grid. When a CME slams into Earth's magnetic field, it can induce geomagnetically induced currents, GICs, in our long-distance transmission lines. Those surges overwhelm transformers and substations, sometimes irreversibly damaging them. You don't just flip a switch and bring those systems back online. The blackout in Quebec in 1989 took out power to 6 million people for 9 hours because of a relatively minor geomagnetic storm. If something even close to the scale of the 1859 Carrington event were to strike today, experts estimate the damage could take months to repair. And that's assuming we even have the replacement transformers available, which we almost certainly don't. Our grid is old, fragile, and stretched thin. I want you to understand that. One major storm and the lights don't just go out, they stay out. No power means no heating, no cooling, no water pumps, no refrigeration. Hospitals running on backup generators until the fuel runs dry, grocery stores emptied in hours, gas stations offline, communication systems silent, banking frozen. Law enforcement stretched too thin. Within days, modern society could collapse into chaos. You'd be on your own. No cavalry coming. This is why I'm shouting this message from the rooftops now. If you wait for the government or utility companies to fix it for you, you'll be waiting in the cold and the dark. I've seen the projections, I've read the scientific warnings, and the timeline is terrifyingly short. Preparing now isn't optional. It's survival. Get your backup power, secure your water, stockpile food, and make sure you have a way to communicate off-grid, because when the next solar storm strikes, you won't have time to scramble. By then, it will already be too late. Worst case scenario, if you think everything I've told you so far sounds bad, I need you to understand something. It can get far worse. What keeps me awake at night, what makes my stomach churn when I read the scientific journals and expert testimonies, is the worst case scenario. This isn't hyperbole, and it's not some made-up disaster movie plot. A direct hit from a large coronal mass ejection, one on par with the Carrington event of 1859, wouldn't just inconvenience us for a few hours or days. It would cripple modern civilization, possibly for months or even years. Let me take you back to 1859 for a second. Telegraph operators around the world watched in horror as their equipment sparked, caught fire, and in some cases even electrocuted the operators themselves. Telegraph lines melted. The auroras stretched all the way down to the Caribbean, so bright that people could read newspapers at midnight. That was with 19th century technology, simple wires and rudimentary electrical equipment. Now imagine what that same solar storm would do to our globalized, hyper-electrified, digitally tethered society. We've built our world on fragile systems, satellites that hover precariously in orbit, substations that hum with delicate circuits, fiber optic cables and server farms that pulsed with the lifeblood of our economy. A Carrington-level event today wouldn't just knock out a few telegraphs. It could obliterate the satellites that guide our GPS, collapse the internet backbone, fry substations and transformers across continents, and leave entire nations powerless for months. We're talking about a geomagnetic tsunami, a wall of solar fury slamming into Earth's magnetosphere and pumping electrical currents into our grid that it was never designed to handle. And don't comfort yourself by thinking, well, it's rare, it won't happen again in my lifetime. NASA and NOAA have already warned us, it's not if, it's when. The Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, has documented near misses in the past few decades, and if the CME of July 2012 had been pointed just a few days differently, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. We'd be fighting to survive in a blacked-out world. I can't sugarcoat it. A direct hit could cause long-term, cascading failures across the globe. Supply chains would collapse, water systems would fail, hospitals would be crippled, modern agriculture would grind to a halt. Without GPS and precision farming, harvests would fail. Within weeks, cities would empty as people fled in search of food, water, and safety. Without communications, coordination would vanish, and without power, even basic governance would be paralyzed. If you think an EMP from a nuclear blast is terrifying, understand this. A Carrington-level CME is nature's version of an EMP, but potentially bigger and longer lasting. The grid damage could stretch beyond borders and overwhelm every repair crew on Earth. It wouldn't be a regional disaster, it would be global, and it would be slow to fix. The world's supply of spare transformers is minuscule. Manufacturing new ones can take a year or more. We could be staring down a blackout that stretches not just for days, but for years in some regions. Imagine the chaos, the desperation. This is why I'm telling you, you have to prepare as if your life depends on it. Because it does. Preparation for solar storms. I'm not telling you all of this to scare you without hope. No, quite the opposite. Fear without action is useless, but fear that drives preparation, that's survival instinct, and it will save your life. I've already started preparing, and I'm begging you to do the same. Don't assume the government will step in and save you. Don't assume you'll have time to react when the alert comes. When that CME is detected and we're given 15, maybe 30 hours notice, it'll be too late to get the supplies you need. By then, the shelves will be empty, the fuel stations drained, and the roads clogged. You need to prepare now. The first step I took, and that you must take, is stockpiling the absolute essentials. I've quietly built up supplies of food, water, and medications to last at least 6 months. Forget the 3-day kits. That's not enough. Think long-term. Canned goods, freeze-dried meals, water filtration systems, and all the prescriptions or over-the-counter medications your family might need. Because when supply chains collapse, pharmacies won't restock, grocery stores won't get deliveries, and water treatment plants won't pump clean water. But physical supplies alone won't be enough. You have to think about protecting the tools that can help you rebuild and survive in the aftermath. That's where electromagnetic shielding comes in. You've probably heard the term Faraday cage. It's not just a curiosity, it's an absolute necessity. A Faraday cage blocks electromagnetic energy, shielding your critical devices from the geomagnetic surge of a CME. I've built several using steel trash cans, lined with cardboard and sealed with conductive gaskets. It's not fancy, but it works. The key is to create a continuous conductive barrier around your devices, so that the electrical charge rides around the outside and doesn't penetrate within. I didn't stop there. Inside those cages, I layered protection by placing my most critical items in specialized Faraday bags. These double layers of attenuation dramatically reduce the risk that any residual energy slips through. My ham radios, backup power stations, LED lanterns, they're all secured in this way. For larger items, I wrap them in Faraday fabric, a specially woven material that blocks electromagnetic pulses, and sealed them up tight. I even experimented with DIY methods, wrapping cardboard boxes in multiple layers of heavy-duty aluminum foil. It's cheaper than you think, and incredibly effective when done correctly. Some people scoffed when they saw me doing this. They won't be laughing when their phones, radios, and generators are dead, and I'm still operational. Don't make the mistake of thinking a surge protector or an unplugged device is enough. A CME's energy can induce currents in anything metal, anything long enough to act like an antenna. You need true shielding, specific equipment to protect. Now, let's talk brass tacks. What do you actually need to shield? What's worth protecting in your Faraday cages? I asked myself this question, and I'll tell you exactly what I prioritized. First and foremost, communication tools. When the grid goes down and cell towers are dead, ham and GMRS radios will be your lifeline. They don't rely on centralized infrastructure, and if you have the right frequencies and licenses, you can communicate with neighbors, loved ones, and emergency groups over dozens or even hundreds of miles. I've got handheld ham radios sealed in Faraday bags, along with extra batteries and charging cables. Next were lighting solutions. Don't underestimate how dangerous complete darkness can be, especially in urban environments. I packed LED lanterns, headlamps, and battery-powered flashlights, along with rechargeable batteries. Light means safety. Light means security at night. And LED devices are energy efficient enough to last weeks on a single charge, especially if you rotate them carefully. Then I protected my backup power. Solar panels, small foldable ones, and larger portable panels are tucked away with care. Alongside them, portable power stations and inverters, devices that can store solar energy and run small appliances or communication gear. Without power, all those radios and lights won't do much good. But with a protected solar setup, you've got independence. You've got resilience. I also included one piece of gear you might not have considered, a Geiger counter. I don't just worry about solar storms. In a chaotic world where power grids collapse, nuclear plants and other sensitive infrastructure can fail too. Radiation detection isn't paranoia, it's prudence. My Geiger counter is nestled safely alongside the rest. I know this sounds overwhelming. I know it sounds extreme. But extreme times demand extreme preparation. If you wait until the alerts start flashing on the news, you'll be standing in an empty store, watching the lights flicker and die. By then it will be too late. Your only hope is to build your shield now. Prepare your supplies now. Shield your gear now. Because I promise you, when that solar storm comes roaring toward us, when the sky turns red and the power dies, you'll be glad you listened. Valeu. Additional Faraday cage enhancements. I learned the hard way that when it comes to shielding your survival gear, good enough isn't good enough. Early on, when I first built my Faraday cages, I made the classic rookie mistake. I trusted the basic designs. Steel trash cans, cardboard insulation, aluminum foil layers. I thought that was solid. I thought I could check that box and move on. But the deeper I dug, the more late-night rabbit holes I went down, the more unsettling facts I uncovered. The truth is, a half measure of protection can lull you into a false sense of security. And in a CME event, false security is a death sentence. Let's talk about that cardboard insulation. At first glance, it makes sense. It's non-conductive, it prevents your devices from touching the metal shell of your cage, and it's cheap. But cardboard is flimsy. It breaks down over time, it absorbs moisture, and it's laughably thin compared to what could really shield your gear from a massive surge. That's why I ripped it all out. Every last shred. I replaced it with thick rubber mats, not just any rubber, either. I used stall mats, the kind designed to withstand the weight and impact of 1,000-pound animals. Industrial-grade, dense, heavy rubber. That rubber doesn't degrade easily, it won't crumble under humidity, and most importantly, it provides serious insulation against conduction and arcing. I don't want to just hope my radio isn't touching the wall. I want to be damn sure there's a rock-silent, non-conductive barrier between my gear and that cage's metal shell. But it didn't stop there. I kept asking myself, what happens if the CME's induced current is stronger than I thought? What happens if my cage becomes saturated with charge? That's when I started exploring something many preppers gloss over: grounding. The experts argue about it endlessly. Some say grounding a Faraday cage isn't necessary because the cage works by redistributing charge around the outside, not channeling it into the earth. Others say grounding provides an additional escape route for excess charge, reducing arcing risk inside the cage. Here's where I landed, and listen closely, because this is important. I don't gamble with maybe. I grounded my cages. Every one of them. I sunk copper grounding rods into the earth, attached heavy gauge copper wire, and clamped them securely to my cages. Why? Because if that solar storm unloads more electromagnetic energy than modern science anticipates, and trust me, the Carrington event did exactly that, I want to know that every stray volt has a fast, clean path into the earth. I don't want to risk my radios frying inside their own supposed sanctuary. Look, I'm not taking chances. Neither should you. If you're going to the trouble to shield your lifelines, your communication, your light, your power, don't half-ass it. Upgrade your insulation. Ground your cages. Build like your life depends on it. Because when the sky burns red and the power grid shatters, it will. Reach a call from the protect what you can, accept what you can't. The deeper I prepare for a catastrophic grid failure, the more I've come to grips with a cold, unsettling truth. I can't save everything. Neither can you. That realization hit me like a gut punch one night as I stood in my garage, surrounded by stacks of gear, tangled wires, sealed food buckets, and carefully wrapped electronics. I remember staring at my solar panels, my backup power stations, my radios, my lanterns, and feeling a chill crawl up my spine. Because no matter how well I build my Faraday cages, no matter how much I stockpile, no matter how many redundancies I engineer, some things are going to fry. And the sooner you understand that, the better your odds of surviving what's coming. We aren't up against a small, isolated blackout here. This isn't just a downed power line from a thunderstorm. If we take a direct hit from a Carrington-level CME, Or worse, an event we've never even witnessed in modern history, the cascade of failures will be merciless. Entire grids will collapse like dominoes. Substations will explode, satellites will blink out, maybe permanently. The internet backbone could fracture beyond repair in some areas. Planes could fall from the sky. The scale of destruction will be biblical. That's why I've adopted what I call ruthless triage. I've stopped trying to protect everything, and I've started focusing on what matters most for survival. Radios first, lighting second, power generation third. Everything else, nice to have, but expendable. I prioritize gear that helps me communicate, navigate, and sustain life in a blackout world. Entertainment gadgets, luxury electronics, even some tools? If I have to sacrifice them to shield what's vital, so be it. They're dead weight in the aftermath of grid collapse. It's not just about equipment either, it's about mindset. I've hardened myself to expect permanent losses. I don't daydream about the grid snapping back in a few days. I train like I'll be living in the dark for months. That means cash on hand, because ATMs and card readers won't work. Paper maps, because GPS satellites might be toast. Old-school communication like HAM and GMRS radios, because the cell towers will be down. And hard copies of critical info, medical guides, survival manuals, plant identification charts, because cloud storage won't save you when the clouds are on fire. I want you to think about your own gear right now. Could you walk into your garage or basement tonight and make the hard calls? Could you set aside the gadgets you like to protect the tools you need? Most people can't. Most people won't. They'll lose precious time dithering over sentimentality, and when the solar storm hits, it'll all burn together. Not me, not you, not if you're listening carefully. We protect what we must to survive. We accept what we can't. That brutal clarity is the difference between life and death when the lights go out and don't come back. Don't rely on authorities to save you. I need you to hear me clearly now, and I don't care if it rattles your nerves. Help is not coming fast enough. When the grid collapses under the weight of a monster solar storm, don't waste precious hours sitting by your dead phone waiting for FEMA, the National Guard, or the local utility company to come knocking. They won't. At least, not for a very long time. And by the time they do, the damage might be so widespread, so overwhelming, that even they are powerless to offer more than scraps. I've spent months poring over government white papers, disaster mitigation reports, and after-action breakdowns from past grid failures. I've seen with my own eyes how slow-moving and underprepared even the best-funded agencies can be when the system fractures. Quebec 1989. That was a small taste of what's possible. And it took 9 hours to get power restored in just one region. Imagine that failure scaled across an entire continent. Substations fried, transformers melted, communications satellites shredded by radiation. The logistics alone would paralyze emergency response teams. You think they'll have spare transformers sitting in a warehouse? Think again. The big ones, the kind that power whole cities, take months to manufacture and ship. They're custom-built, often overseas. We're talking about lead times of a year or more under normal conditions. During a global catastrophe, forget it. And don't even get me started on communications. You won't be calling 911. You won't be sending text messages. You won't be refreshing social media to see where the FEMA trucks are rolling in. If satellites are crippled, if undersea cables are fried, if microwave towers are knocked offline, we'll be back in the 1800s overnight. That eerie silence will be deafening, and it'll stretch on longer than most people can fathom. That's why I've made the conscious decision to operate under the assumption that I am my own first responder. If you're serious about survival, you need to do the same. Build redundancies. Stockpile as if no cavalry is coming. Train your family in basic first aid, water purification, navigation, and self-defense. Form tight-knit local networks now, not later, because when the grid collapses, your neighbors are your new FEMA. If you've got comms gear protected in Faraday cages, ham radios, GMRS walkies, solar-charged power banks, you might just be one of the few nodes of contact in a region blackened by chaos. That makes you valuable. That makes you powerful. I don't trust luck. I don't trust hope. And as much as I respect the men and women in uniform, I don't trust overstretched emergency agencies to magically save me when the CME hits. If I'm wrong and the trucks show up sooner, great. But if I'm right, and I probably am, I won't be sitting helpless in the dark while my neighbors panic. Prepare like you're alone. Prepare like no one's coming. Because in the first days, weeks, or months after a grid failure of this scale, or you will be, prepare for long-term isolation and blackout living. There's a brutal fact I've accepted, and if you're wise, you'll burn it into your brain too. This isn't going to be a 72-hour inconvenience. No polite weekend blackout where the power blinks back on in time for Monday morning coffee. If a Carrington-class solar storm slams into Earth, or even a slightly smaller monster, CME, takes a direct shot, we are staring down the barrel of long-term, grinding isolation in a crippled world. Weeks without power? Absolutely. Months? Almost guaranteed in some regions. Years? For full recovery in worst-case scenarios? Don't dismiss it as paranoia. The experts won't say it publicly, but I will. You need to get ready to live like a ghost in a dead grid. I've built my entire prepping strategy around this ugly scenario, because I know the masses, the unprepared millions, will crumble fast. Once the lights go out and the food spoils in their refrigerators, the water stops flowing from the taps, and the cell towers stay dark for days on end, most will descend into confusion, panic, and desperation faster than anyone wants to admit. They'll huddle in their homes, waiting for the government that won't arrive. They'll burn through their last battery charges watching blank phone screens. They'll flood empty grocery stores, not realizing supply chains shattered days earlier. That won't be me. I've hardened every layer of my life to endure long-term blackout living. Water first, because dehydration kills faster than hunger. I've got gravity-fed filtration systems, rainwater collection barrels, and purification tablets. No reliance on electric pumps. Food second, shelf-stable, calorie-dense, and easy to prepare with minimal heat. I've got cast-iron cookware and rocket stoves that burn twigs and scrap wood. No propane dependency. Heat and shelter next. Wool blankets, thermal gear, blackout curtains to keep warmth in and prying eyes out. Security? Let's just say I don't advertise what I own, but I've drilled my perimeter defense and family defense plans until they're muscle memory. But here's the part most people don't think about. Psychological endurance. Long-term isolation shatters weak minds. The silence, the darkness, the gnawing uncertainty. If you're not ready to go weeks or months with no contact beyond your immediate family or trusted tribe, you're vulnerable. That's why I've stockpiled entertainment, books, board games, cards, printed puzzles. That's why I keep written journals and encourage my group to write too. Mental resilience is survival gear, just as much as food and ammo. I don't sugarcoat this for myself, and I won't for you either. If a CME fries the grid, the world we knew will shatter in an instant. Modern conveniences, communication, commerce, even basic law enforcement, gone. What remains is a dark, fractured, dangerous landscape where the prepared thrive and the unprepared starve. The sooner you adapt your mindset to long-term blackout living, not just short-term emergency prep, the better your chances of coming out the other side intact. I've made peace with the darkness. I've rehearsed my days in a world where light bulbs don't glow, car engines don't hum, and the internet is a ghost town. Have you? If not, it's time to catch up. Fast.